Dear unknown friends, it has been about 1 year since we started this channel. So for today's episode, we present a compilation of our first 2 episodes.
Almost a full year has passed since we started here, and we have learnt so much in the process. We have plans for some quite interesting shows in the coming months. We hope you'll stick with us for many years to come.
And please, stay until the end for some announcements. Enjoy the show.
This is true and remote from all cover of falsehood. Whatever is below is similar to that which is above. Through this, the marvels of the work of one thing are procured and perfected. Also, as all things are made from one, by the consideration of one, so all things were made from this one, by conjunction. The father of it is the sun, the mother, the moon. The wind bore it in the womb. Its nurse is the earth, the mother of all perfection. Its power is perfected. If it is turned into earth, separate the earth from the fire, the subtle and thin from the crude and coarse, prudently, with modesty and wisdom. This ascends from the earth into the sky, and again descends from the sky to the earth, and receives the power and efficacy of things above and of things below. By this means you will acquire the glory of the whole world, and so you will drive away all shadows and blindness. For this by its fortitude snatches the palm from all other fortitude and power. For it is able to penetrate and subdue everything subtle and everything crude and hard. By this means the world was founded, and hence the marvelous conjunctions of it, and admirable effects, since this is the way by which these marvels may be brought about. And because of this they have called me Hermes Trismegistus, since I have the 3 parts of the wisdom and philosophy of the whole universe. My speech is finished, which I have spoken concerning the solar work.
Episode 1, Introduction to Hermetic Thought in light of the Compilation. Dear unknown friend, welcome to the Temple of the Living Fire channel. The preceding is a translation of the Emerald Tablet as translated by Sir Isaac Newton in 1680. This channel will be devoted to exploring the primordial wisdom teachings of Hermeticism. It is our hope that many might benefit spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. We will present the wisdom and ideas of various teachers on the subject of Hermeticism and Christian Hermeticism, some quite well known, some quite obscure, some even from our own order. We will explore the Holy Kabbalah, tarot, astrology, and various practices for health and healing, both spiritually and physically. For this opening episode, we would first like to introduce our viewers to the fundamentals of Hermeticism. We will preface this by stating that the subject of Hermeticism, from an academic perspective, its origin and history, is quite complex and at times controversial. For this reason, we will simply be sharing various versions of the occult tradition as they have been handed down in history. One of the more interesting introductions to the subject of Hermetic occult philosophy is to be found in the humble little occult work, the Compilation, published in 1908 and credited to the 3 initiates. We find in its introduction some wonderful points of departure for our journey. Without further ado, we will let the author of the text speak for himself in his introduction to the Compilation, which reads as follows.
There is no portion of the occult teachings possessed by the world which have been so closely guarded as the fragments of the Hermetic teachings which have come down to us over the tens of centuries, which have elapsed since the lifetime of its great founder, Hermes Trismegistus, the scribe of the gods, who dwelt in old Egypt in the days when the present race of men was in its infancy. Contemporary with Abraham, and, if the legends be true, an instructor of that venerable sage, Hermes was and is the great central sun of occultism, whose rays have served to illumine the countless teachings which have promulgated since his time. All the fundamental and basic teachings embedded in the esoteric teachings of every race may be traced back to Hermes. Even the most ancient teachings of India undoubtedly have their roots in the original Hermetic teachings. From the land of the Ganges, many advanced occultists wandered to the land of Egypt and sat at the feet of the Master. From him they obtained the Master Key, which explained and reconciled their divergent views, and thus the secret doctrine was firmly established. From other lands also came the learned ones, all of whom regarded Hermes as the master of masters, and his influence was so great that in spite of the many wanderings from the path on the part of the centuries of teachers in these different lands, there may still be found a certain basic resemblance and correspondence which underlies the many and often quite divergent theories entertained and taught by the occultists of these different lands today. The student of comparative religions will be able to perceive the influence of the Hermetic teachings in every religion worthy of the name, now known to man, whether it be a dead religion or one in full vigor in our own times. There is always a certain correspondence in spite of the contradictory features, and the Hermetic teachings act as the great reconciler. The lifework of Hermes seems to have been in the direction of planting the great seed truth, which has grown and blossomed in so many strange forms, rather than to establish a school of philosophy which would dominate the world's thought. But nevertheless, the original truths taught by him have been kept intact in their original purity by a few men in each age, who, refusing great numbers of half-developed students and followers, followed the Hermetic custom and reserved their truth for the few who were ready to comprehend and master it. From lip to ear, the truth has been handed down among the few. There have always been a few of the Hermetic teachings, and such have always been willing to use their lamps to relight the lesser lamps of the outside world when the light of truth grew dim and clouded by reason of neglect, and when the wicks became clogged with foreign matter. There were always a few to tend faithfully the altar of the truth, upon which was kept alight the perpetual lamp of wisdom. These men devoted their lives to the labor of love, which the poet has so well stated in his lines. Oh, let not the flame die out. Cherished age after age in its dark cavern, in its holy temples cherished, fed by pure ministers of love, let not the flame die out. These men have never sought popular approval, nor numbers of followers. They are indifferent to these things, for they know how few there are in each generation who are ready for the truth, or who would recognize it if it were presented to them. They reserve the strong meat for men, while others furnish the milk for babes. They reserve their pearls of wisdom for the few elect, who recognize their value and who wear them in their crowns, instead of casting them before the materialistic, vulgar swine, who would trample them in the mud and mix them with their disgusting mental food. But still, these men have never forgotten or overlooked the original teachings of Hermes regarding the passing on of the words of truth to those ready to receive it, which teaching is stated in the Compilation as follows: Where fall the footsteps of the Master, the ears of those ready for his teaching open wide. And again, when the ears of the student are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. But their customary attitude has always been strictly in accordance with the other Hermetic aphorism, also in the Compilation. The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. There are those who have criticized this attitude of the Hermeticists, and who have claimed that they did not manifest the proper spirit in their policy of seclusion and reticence. But a moment's glance back over the pages of history will show the wisdom of the masters, who knew the folly of attempting to teach to the world that which it was neither ready nor willing to receive. The Hermeticists have never sought to be martyrs, and have instead sat silently aside with a pitying smile on their closed lips, while the heathen raged noisily about them in their customary amusement of putting to death and torture the honest but misguided enthusiasts who imagined that they could force upon a race of barbarians the truth capable of being understood only by the elect who had advanced along the path. And the spirit of persecution has not as yet died out in the land. There are certain Hermetic teachings which, if publicly promulgated, would bring down upon the teachers a great cry of scorn and revilement from the multitude, who would again raise the cry of crucify, crucify. In this little work, we have endeavored to give you an idea of the fundamental teachings of the Kybalion, striving to give you the working principles, leaving you to apply them yourselves, rather than attempting to work out the teaching in detail. If you are a true student, you will be able to work out and apply these principles. If not, then you must develop yourself into one. For otherwise, the Hermetic teachings will be as words, words, words to you. The three initiates. The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. The Kybalion. From old Egypt have come the fundamental esoteric and occult teachings which have so strongly influenced the philosophies of all races, nations, and peoples for several thousand years. Egypt, the home of the pyramids and the Sphinx, was the birthplace of the hidden wisdom and mystic teachings. From her secret doctrine, all nations have borrowed. India, Persia, Chaldea, Media, China, Japan, Assyria, ancient Greece and Rome, and other ancient countries partook liberally at the feast of knowledge which the hierophants and masters of the land of Isis so freely provided for those who came prepared to partake of the great store of mystic and occult lore which the masterminds of that ancient land had gathered together. In ancient Egypt dwelt the great adepts and masters who have never been surpassed, and who seldom have been equaled during the centuries that have taken their processional flight since the days of the great Hermes. In Egypt was located the great lodge of lodges of the mystics. At the doors of her temples entered the neophytes, who afterward, as hierophants, adepts, and masters, traveled to the four corners of the earth, carrying with them the precious knowledge which they were ready, anxious, and willing to pass on to those who were ready to receive the same. All students of the occult recognize the debt that they owe to these venerable masters of that ancient land. But among these great masters of ancient Egypt, there once dwelt one of whom masters hailed as the Master of Masters. This man, if indeed he was, dwelt in Egypt in the earliest days. He was known as Hermes Trismegistus. He was the father of the occult wisdom, the founder of astrology, the discoverer of alchemy. The details of his life story are lost to history, owing to the lapse of the years, though several of the ancient countries disputed with each other in their claims to the honor of having furnished his birthplace, and this thousands of years ago. The date of his sojourn in Egypt, in that his last incarnation on this planet, is not now known, but it has been fixed at the early days of the oldest dynasties of Egypt, long before the days of Moses. The best authorities regard him as a contemporary of Abraham, and some of the Jewish traditions go so far as to claim that Abraham acquired a portion of his mystic knowledge from Hermes himself. As the years rolled by after his passing from this plane of life, tradition recording that he lived 300 years in the flesh, the Egyptians deified Hermes and made him one of their gods under the name of Thoth. Years after, the people of ancient Greece also made him one of their many gods, calling him Hermes, the god of wisdom. The Egyptians revered his memory for many centuries, yes, tens of centuries, calling him the scribe of the gods, and bestowing upon him distinctively his ancient title Trismegistus, which means the thrice great, the great great, the greatest great, etc. In all the ancient lands, the name of Hermes Trismegistus was revered, the name being synonymous with the fount of wisdom. Even to this day we use the term hermetic in the sense of secret, sealed so that nothing can escape, etc., and this by reason of the fact that the followers of Hermes always observed the principle of secrecy in their teachings. They did not believe in casting pearls before swine, but rather held to the teaching, milk for babes, meat for strong men, both of which maxims are familiar to readers of the Christian scriptures, but both of which had been used by the Egyptians for centuries before the Christian era. And this policy of careful dissemination of the truth has always characterized the Hermeticist, even unto the present day. The Hermetic teachings are to be found in all lands, among all religions, but never identified with any particular country, nor with any particular religious sect. This is because of the warning of the ancient teachers against allowing the secret doctrine to become crystallized into a creed. The wisdom of this caution is apparent to all students of history. The ancient occultism of India and Persia degenerated and was largely lost, owing to the fact that the teachers became priests and so mixed theology with the philosophy, the result being that the occultism of India and Persia has been gradually lost amidst the mass of religious superstition, cults, creeds and gods. So it was with ancient Greece and Rome. So it was with the Hermetic teachings of the Gnostics and early Christians, which were lost at the time of Constantine, whose iron hand smothered philosophy with the blanket of theology, losing to the Christian Church that which was its very essence and spirit, and causing it to grope throughout several centuries before it found the way back to its ancient faith. The indications apparent to all careful observers in this 20th century being that the Church is now struggling to get back to its ancient mystic teachings. But there were always a few faithful souls who kept alive the flame, tending it carefully, and not allowing its light to become extinguished. And thanks to these staunch hearts and fearless minds, we have the truth still with us. But it is not found in books to any great extent. It has been passed along from master to student, from initiate to hierophant, from lip to ear. When it was written down at all, its meaning was veiled in terms of alchemy and astrology, so that only those possessing the key could read it right. This was made necessary in order to avoid the persecutions of the theologians of the Middle Ages, who fought the secret doctrine with fire and sword, stake, gibbet, and cross. Even to this day there will be found but few reliable books on the Hermetic philosophy, although there are countless references to it in many books written on various phases of occultism, and yet Hermetic philosophy is the only master key which will open all the doors of the occult teachings. In the early days, there was a compilation of certain basic Hermetic doctrines, passed on from teacher to student, which was known as the Compilation, the exact significance and meaning of the term having been lost for several centuries. This teaching, however, is known to many to whom it has descended, from mouth to ear, on and on throughout the centuries. Its precepts have never been written down or printed, so far as we know. Precepts which were non-understandable to outsiders, but which were readily understood by students after the axioms, maxims, and precepts had been explained and exemplified by the Hermetic initiates to their neophytes. These teachings really constituted the basic principles of the art of Hermetic alchemy, which, contrary to the general belief, dealt in the mastery of mental forces rather than material elements, the transmutation of one kind of mental vibrations into others, instead of the changing of one kind of metal into another. The legends of the philosopher's stone, which would turn base metal into gold, was an allegory relating to Hermetic philosophy, readily understood by all students of true Hermeticism.
This book explores 7 principles that serve as the aforementioned master key to all occult understanding. These are: 1. The principle of mentalism. 2. The principle of correspondence. 3. The principle of vibration. 4. The principle of polarity. 5. The principle of rhythm. 6. The principle of cause and effect. 7. The principle of gender.
1. The principle of mentalism. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances, which we know under the terms of the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy. In short, all that is apparent to our material senses is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as a universal, infinite, living mind. It also explains that all the phenomenal world or universe is simply a mental creation of the All, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole, and in its parts or units, has its existence in the mind of the All, in which mind we live and move and have our being. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention, and which, without such explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe, and to apply the same to his well-being and advancement. The Hermetic student is enabled to apply intelligently the great mental laws, instead of using them in a haphazard manner. With the master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of the mental and psychic turnpike of knowledge, and enter the same freely and intelligently. This principle explains the true nature of energy, power, and matter, and why and how all these are subordinate to the mastery of mind. One of the old Hermetic masters wrote, long ages ago, "He who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery." And these words are as true today as at the time they were first written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student knocks in vain at the many doors of the temple. 2. The principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as below, so above. This principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The old Hermetic axiom ran in these words, as above, so below, as below, so above. And the grasping of this principle gives one the means of solving many a dark paradox and hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that would otherwise be unknowable to us. This principle is of universal application and manifestation on the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe. It is a universal law. The ancient Hermeticists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent that a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught. Just as a knowledge of the principles of geometry enables man to measure distant suns and their movements while seated in his observatory, so a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel. 3. The principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything motes, everything vibrates. This principle embodies the truth that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. Facts which modern science endorses, and which each new scientific discovery tends to verify. And yet this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Egypt. This principle explains that the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration. From the All, which is pure spirit, down to the grossest form of matter, all is in vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position in the scale. The vibration of spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it is practically at rest, just as a rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale, there are gross forms of matter whose vibrations are so low as to seem at rest. Between these poles, there are millions upon millions of varying degrees of vibration. From corpuscle and electron, atom and molecule, to worlds and universes, everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration, and also on the mental planes, whose states depend upon vibrations, and even on to the spiritual planes. An understanding of this principle, with the appropriate formulas, enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others. The masters also apply this principle to the conquering of natural phenomena in various ways. He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, says one of the old writers. 4. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual, everything has two poles, everything has its pair of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains the old paradoxes that have perplexed so many, which have been stated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc. It explains that in everything there are two poles, or opposite aspects, and that opposites are really only the two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. To illustrate, heat and cold, although opposites, are really the same thing, the differences consisting merely of degrees of the same thing. Look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat terminates and cold begins. There is no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms, heat and cold, simply indicate varying degrees of the same thing, and that same thing which manifests as heat and cold is merely a form, variety, and rate of vibration. So heat and cold are simply the two poles of that which we call heat, and the phenomena attendant thereupon are manifestations of the principle of polarity. The same principle manifests in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing, the difference consisting of varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomena. Where does darkness leave off and light begin? What is the difference between large and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, between high and low, between positive and negative? The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Let us take a radical and extreme example, that of love and hate, two mental states apparently totally different. And yet, there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, and a middle point in which we use the terms like or dislike, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are at a loss to know whether we like or dislike, or neither. And all are simply degrees of the same thing, as you will see, if you will but think for a moment. And more than this, and considered of more importance by the Hermeticists, it is possible to change the vibrations of hate to the vibrations of love, in one's own mind and in the minds of others. Many of you who read these lines have had personal experiences of the involuntary rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse, in your own case and that of others, and you will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of the will, by means of the Hermetic formulas. Good and evil are but the poles of the same thing, and the Hermeticist understands the art of transmuting evil into good by means of an application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principle will enable one to change his own polarity, as well as that of others, if he will devote the time and study necessary to master the art. 5. The principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, to and fro, a flow and inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and low tide, between the two poles which exist, in accordance with the principle of polarity described a moment ago. There is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This is in the affairs of the universe: suns, worlds, men, animals, mind, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally in the mental states of man, and it is with this latter that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. The Hermeticists have grasped this principle, finding its universal application, and have also discovered certain means to overcome its effects in themselves by the use of the appropriate formulas and methods. They apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease its operation, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon themselves to a certain degree, depending upon the mastery of the principle. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. In this and similar methods consist the art of the Hermeticists. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously, but the master does this consciously, and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses who are swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by the Hermeticists, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. 6. The principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. This principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect, an effect from every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law, that nothing ever merely happens, that there is no such thing as chance, that while there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower planes, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermeticists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect to a certain degree, and by mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causes instead of effects. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves, heredity, suggestion, and other outward causes, moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters, rising to the plane above, dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life, instead of being played and moved about by other wills and environment. They use the principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to exile on their own plane. In this statement, there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. 7. The principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This principle embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, the masculine and feminine principles ever at work. This is true not only of the physical plane, but of the mental and even the spiritual planes. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher planes it takes on higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the two elements or principles, or this great principle within it, him or her. Every male thing has the female element also. Every female contains also the male principle. You would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration. You must understand and study this Hermetic principle. It contains the solution of many mysteries of life. We caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices, which are taught under fanciful titles and which are a prostitution of the great natural principle of gender. Such base revivals of the ancient infamous forms of phallicism tend to ruin mind, body, and soul, and Hermetic philosophy has ever sounded the warning note against these degraded teachings which tend toward lust, licentiousness, and perversion of nature's principles. If you seek such teachings, you must go elsewhere for them. Hermeticism contains nothing for you along these lines. To the pure, all things are pure. To the base, all things are base. So saith the Compilation, so mote it be.
Dear unknown friend, we would like to leave you with a quote from Carl Gustav Jung, which we hope will serve to set the tone for part 2 of our introduction to Hermeticism. This reads as follows. The cooperation of conscious reasoning with the data of the unconscious is called the transcendent function. This function progressively unites the opposites. Psychotherapy makes use of it to heal neurotic dissociations, but this function had already served as the basis of Hermetic philosophy for 17 centuries. Namaste, the philosophers of the living fire.
Now let us finish with the ceremonial closing prayer of the philosophers of the living fire. O Jehovah Adonai, Father of all lights, Father of all mercies, in the name of the cosmic Son and his Holy Mother, we do most humbly and earnestly beseech of thee to bless all sorts and conditions of men, women, and children, good, bad, and indifferent, in all 4 quarters of the earth, all who are sick, all who are sad, all who are fallen or distressed or despairing, all who are in hospitals or asylums or in prisons, all who are in danger on the sea or in foreign lands, yea, all men everywhere, and all spirits in all parts of God's dominions. May thy kingdom come, and be established on earth as it is in heaven. We now pronounce universal benediction to go out from us to all quarters of the earth, to all creatures that inhabit it, and to all worlds. So mote it be.
Dear unknown friend, welcome to the Temple of the Living Fire channel and our second episode. Today, we are continuing our introduction to Hermeticism with special attention to the first arcanum of the tarot and the law of correspondence.
One of the most profound spiritual and Hermetic texts of the 20th century came from Valentin Tomberg, whose magnum opus is considered to be Meditations on Tarot, a journey into Christian Hermeticism. In his first meditation, he invites us to contemplate the first arcanum, known as the magician, or juggler. It is this arcanum that is the master key to the remaining 21 arcanum. The arcanum reflects an aspiration towards a state of unity between the conscious and unconscious mind, between the divine and personal will. The very goal of Carl Gustav Jung's transcendent function, a state of mind necessary to proceed into the depths of the night, or as Tomberg says, a zone of silence, necessary to enter into the mysteries of the Book of Thoth, or simply the Tarot. Taking note of the image as it is depicted in the Rider-Waite deck, we find the 4 instruments of the magician, the wand, chalice, pentacle, and sword, which are symbols of the tetragrammaton, the 4 Kabbalistic universes associated with the sacred name, the 4 elements, and expanding this concept further. The 4 Jungian functions. Above his head is the symbol of infinity, which is also suggested in the Tarot of Marseille, by the hat placed upon the magician's head. This suggests the connection to infinity and to the principle of rhythm. The other name the arcanum is known by, the juggler, is a key to understanding the arcanum's relationship to the experience of concentration and accordance with the rhythms of various planes of existence. The card, in its most essential details, depicts a state of consciousness which the mystical Hebrew traditions call kavanah. It is, in a word, mysticism, and it is this mystical state of consciousness which becomes gnosis in the following card, the passive high priestess, and dynamic catharsis in the 3rd arcanum, which is sacred magic. This state of consciousness is that which is needed for all fruitful contemplative, alchemical and magical work. It is the state of consciousness which is truly attuned to both the above and below, and because of the magician's state of harmony with the rhythmic movement of higher planes of activity, he is able to bring the laws and principles of higher planes of existence into activity in lower planes of existence, producing alchemical change, or simply a miracle. As it is rendered by the Master of Masters, the Father is working, and I am also working. It is interesting to note the Aleph has the value of 1, the monad. The letter itself is composed of 2 yuds connected by a vav, and these letters, when analyzed for their numerical values, are 10 plus 10 plus 6, equaling the number 26, which is the same value through gematria as the great name Yahweh. Aleph then is the point of unity in seed form, containing all potential which unfolds or reveals itself in a plurality of diverse expressions. In this context, the 4 Olamot, or Kabbalistic universes. The author of the aforementioned book makes some profound statements in regard to the problem of achieving this individualized state, which means to say, undivided, and working with the law of correspondence. When he says, quote, "All practical esotericism is founded on the following rule. It is necessary to be one in oneself, concentration without effort, and one with the spiritual world, to have a zone of silence in the soul, in order for a revelatory or actual spiritual experience to be able to take place. In other words, if one wants to practice some form of authentic esotericism, be it mysticism, gnosis, or magic, it is necessary to be the magician, i.e., concentrated without effort, operating with ease as if one were playing and acting with perfect calm. This, then, is the practical teaching of the 1st arcanum of the Tarot. It is the first counsel, commandment, or warning concerning all spiritual practice. It is the Aleph of the alphabet of practical rules of esotericism, and just as all numbers are only aspects, multiples of unity, so are all other practical rules communicated by the other arcana of the Tarot, only aspects and modalities of this basic rule. Such is the practical teaching of the magician. What is its theoretical teaching? It corresponds in every point to the practical teaching, its theoretical operation being only the mental aspect of the practice. Just as the latter proceeds from concentration without effort, i.e., puts unity into practice, so does the attendant theory consist in the basic unity of the natural world, the human world, and the divine world. The tenet of the basic oneness of the world plays the same fundamental role for all theory as that of concentration for all practice. As concentration is the basis of every practical achievement, the tenet of the basic unity of the world is the same with regard to all knowledge. Without it, no knowledge is conceivable. The tenet of the essential unity of all that exists precedes every act of knowledge, and every act of knowledge presupposes the tenet of the unity of the world. The ideal, or ultimate aim, of all philosophy and all science is truth. But truth has no other meaning than that of the reduction of the plurality of phenomena to an essential unity, of facts to laws, of laws to principles, of principles to essence or being. All search for truth, mystical, gnostic, philosophical, and scientific, postulates its existence, i.e., the fundamental unity of the multiplicity of phenomena in the world. Without this unity, nothing would be knowable. How could one proceed from the known to the unknown? And this is indeed the method of progress in knowledge. If the unknown had nothing to do with the known, if the unknown had no relationship with the known and was absolutely and essentially a stranger to it. When we say that the world is knowable, i.e., that knowledge as such exists, we state through this fact itself the tenet of the essential unity of the world or its knowability. We declare that the world is not a mosaic, where a plurality of worlds which are essentially strangers to one another are fitted together, but that it is an organism, all of whose parts are governed by the same principle, revealing it and allowing reduction to it. The relationship of everything and of all beings is the conditio sine qua non of their knowability. End of quote. Dear unknown friend, let us also present the words of the book, The Secret Doctrine of the Rosicrucians, from many decades ago for comparison. The principle of correspondence manifests in a certain correspondence or analogy or agreement between manifestations of the various planes of activity in the cosmos. It is indicated by the old Hermetic aphorism, as above, so below, as below, so above, and by the arcane axiom, ex uno dis omnes, or from one know all. The Rosicrucians and other ancient occultists hold that the laws governing the nature and activity of the amoeba likewise govern the nature and activity of man and beings higher than man. What is true of matter is true of energy and of mind. The occultists make a practical application of this universal principle in the direction of studying the unknown by means of the known, with the knowledge that the same laws govern each. Thus, just as the solar system may be known by means of studying the atoms and molecules, so may the higher planes of being be studied by an examination of the lower planes in manifestation before us. After discovering the operation of certain principles in one thing, we may safely reason by analogy, based upon the assumption that these principles exist in other things on a higher plane, and thus discover the nature of the unknown X. Thus the occultist reasons that there is law and order manifest on every plane of being, that there is a principle of vibration manifest on every plane of being, that there is a principle of rhythm manifest on every plane of being, that there is a principle of cycles manifest on every plane of being, that there is a principle of polarity manifest on every plane of being, that there is a principle of sex manifest on every plane of being. And the further that human investigation is pushed into the unknown, the greater is the proof of the existence of these cosmic principles reasoned out by the ancient occultists upon the fundamental basis of the principle of correspondence. A writer has said of this cosmic principle, "There is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of life and being. The grasping of this truth gives one the means of solving many a dark paradox, many a hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that otherwise would be unknowable to us. This principle is of universal application and manifestation on the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe. It is a universal law." The ancient Hermetists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstructions which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent that a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught. Just as a knowledge of the principles of geometry enables a man to measure distant suns and their movements while seated in an observatory, so a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the moneron, he understands the archangel. End of quote. What was said up to this point about the first arcanum in its direct relationship to the law of correspondence, and with respect to it being the key to unlocking the mysteries of the remaining 21 arcanum, may also be said to be the key to unlocking the mysteries of the 6 remaining Hermetic principles. The importance of this principle cannot be overstated, and is found to be the basis of Carl Jung's a causal connecting principle, synchronicity, which recognized the peculiar experience of an uncanny correspondence between the subjective and objective domain of human experience. The experience of synchronicity testifies to the fact of the underlying and fundamental unity of all things, and, as was mentioned, accordance and agreement between manifestations of the various planes of activity in the cosmos. It is, in fact, not actually acausal, but simply a law and principle that is, as of yet, not understood through the empirical method. Now, dear unknown friend, as to the practical methods of working with these principles. There is spiritual practice, meditation, prayer, theurgical rites, engaging the transcendent function through art, poetry, writing, spending time meditatively in nature, keeping a dream journal, all facilitate development of the Ruah, to use the terminology of Kabbalah, and sensitivity to the spiritual mind, or Neshama. All spiritual practices, worthy of being called such, will be found to have the principle of unification, synthesis, integration, and the balancing of the polarities within them. The Christian cross, the yin-yang, the mandala, are all symbols of this integrated wholeness. The act of bringing one's hands together in prayer is a symbol of uniting the opposites. The petition of the Lord's Prayer contains the essentials of Hermetic understanding. The medicine wheel of the Native Americans is essentially the cross in a circle and resembles many forms of the Hermetic theurgical rites. In addressing the 4 directions in ceremonial work, one is also working with the tetragrammaton, the 4 elements, the 4 Jungian functions, the masculine and feminine energies, and in all cases, above and below. While such ideas and teachings often have little meaning to the concrete conscious mind of the undeveloped man, or Heilig, such symbolic rites speak directly and clearly to the unconscious and higher levels of mind, symbols being the language in which the unconscious speaks to us. Know, dear unknown friend, you can also, in a sense, speak back to it by this same means. And due to the accordance with the various planes of existence, if you are sincere in your efforts, you will get results. Let us leave this episode with a quote from Sefer HaZohar. It reads as follows: "Come see. In any place where male and female are not found as one, the Holy One does not dwell in that place. And blessings are not found except in a place where male and female are found, as it's written, He blessed them and called their name Adam in the day of their being created. It's not written, and He blessed him and called his name Adam. For a human being is not even called Adam, except when male and female are as one. So mote it be. Namaste, dear unknown friend."
So that was a good refresher on the introduction of Hermetic thought. We hope you got something out of that.
All right, now we have a couple of announcements.
Yes, our esoteric school is open and accepting new students. You can find out about that at our website, templeofthelivingfire.com.
Please go check out the website, everyone. Sign up for the course. The first lesson is offered on a donation basis. And it's a hefty lesson at that.
Maybe we should do an episode on the school.
Yeah, let's work on that.
Okay, we'll add it to the list. Um, we have a book coming out soon. That's going to be a first for Living Fire Publishing, but certainly not the last.
Yes, but we didn't write the book. This book was written by Richard P. Adair and it's called The Philosophers of the Living Fire. It's about people who were a part of the order in the first half of the 20th century.
Sounds like such a long time ago when you say it like that.
I know, right? Anyway, it will be out in November, and I'll be excited to talk about that again in an upcoming show. We've had to push the release date due to unforeseen circumstances, but we're back on track, and it feels like November is actually going to be perfect. Don't you think so?
Yeah, the story begins in the fall and really gets going right around Thanksgiving, so I think mood wise, it should be fun for people to pick it up in the fall. And we've both read this book multiple times now. Um, so I think we're both excited to have others read it too.
Yes, I can't wait for people to read this story. And in case we haven't said this yet, the book is written as a novel, but it's actually an autobiography. That's the most interesting part, the true story. And so we'll release an episode on the author/the book around the same time as the book's release.
Great. And if you visit our website or follow us here, you'll see updates to the book release and some other cool stuff.
Okay, so that's it for today. Be sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Look for our Patreon account too, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you and namaste, the philosophers of the living fire.